Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning into our program today. You may know that Family Talk is a listener-supported program, and we remain on the air by your generosity, literally. If you can help us financially, we would certainly appreciate it. God's blessings to you all.
Today on Family Talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Family Talk. This is Jim Veldhuis, sitting in for your host, psychologist and best-selling author, Dr. James Dobson. Today, you'll hear part 2 of Dick Gauch's powerful and moving testimony. He's the founder of Family Life Ministries in Columbus, Ohio, and was the senior pastor at Christian Fellowship Church before retiring in 2004. On the first installment of his story, he shared how he neglected his family and relationship with God because of his overwhelming love and desire for more money and success. Yesterday's show ended on a very somber and dramatic note as Pastor Gauch and his wife were shocked to realize that their daughter Terry's drug problems was a result of her father's absence. Let's listen to how his family continued to unravel from this news and the humble lessons Pastor Gauch was forced to learn through this journey on today's broadcast of Family Talk.
Sue recited some of the things in the letter, and it seemed like a nightmare. I was a pretty mixed up man. I can remember feeling very angry. I wanted to hurt somebody. I wanted to punish someone for what they had done to us, to our daughter. I was hurt too, as a father would. I was hurt because I couldn't believe that our precious little girl could do such a terrible thing. And I remember being scared, and I suppose I've been scared before, but somehow I'd never made it part of my life to even recognize it. But I was really scared that day because I didn't understand drugs, and the things I knew about them and the things I'd heard just scared me to death. And I drove most of the way back to Columbus in that kind of turmoil. And I don't know where it was, maybe 2/3 of the way home. Something within me gained control, and I can remember that inner voice saying, "Wait a minute, aren't you Dick Gauch?" And I could feel that, yes I am. Aren't you the guy that never had a problem he couldn't lick and never had an obstacle he didn't overcome? And I could, yes, that's me. That's right. This is your daughter. I could almost see myself standing in front of Terry and confronting her. I could see Terry begin to cry, and as I kept on, she began to sob, and it's somewhere during that conversation I just could see Terry through her tears and sob, saying, "Oh, Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again." We'd all hug, and it'd be all over. Pretty soon Terry came through the door, and I didn't even let her sit down. I met her in the middle of the room, and I confronted her. Of course, Terry denied it all. We finally produced the letter, and she got very angry for us invading her privacy. These are all typical reactions of kids. And finally, there was no sense hiding it anymore, and finally Terry, the first thing she really said was, I'm glad you found out because I don't have to play games anymore." She looked me right in the eye and she said, "I'm going to do drugs and there's nothing you can do about it." You know, I know grown men that really wouldn't do that to me. And here was my 16-year-old daughter. I became enraged, man possessed. I was going to fight, and see, with a man with a pride and an ego like mine, before I got saved, you better be ready to go all the way, because that's what I meant. I mean, death, whatever it took, I was going to win. My daughter was not going to do this. I went to the police and I turned my daughter and her friends in as drug users. Parents have asked me, was that wise and should we do that? I'm glad I did, I guess. I don't regret it. I did it out of anger, but I did it. I went to the school authorities and turned them in. I did everything I could. I followed them. I intercepted listening on phone messages. I pieced together torn notes out of wastebaskets. I did everything I could. And I'd like to tell you that it worked, but it didn't. It got worse. I couldn't control a 16-year-old daughter. There's a great effect on the family and a tremendous effect on a marriage It had been a good marriage. But you see, with a wayward child goes guilt for the parents and responsibility. And nobody wants to assume that. I didn't. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I'd spend a lot of hours away from the office. And I decided one day, I figured it out finally, that it was Sue's fault. What a nice guy, huh? And Sue had been spending hours alone with all these problems, thinking about it. And Sue wondered about the man who had spent so much time at work and given up vacations and dedicated his job. And she wondered if maybe her daughters hadn't turned out better if he'd have been a father. And Sue decided it was my fault. I don't have to tell you what that does to a marriage. And then your kids, you see, the rest of them don't come through unscathed either. Debbie was the second oldest. Debbie's never taken a drug of any kind in her life. She's kind of a quiet girl, but she's just strong inside. And we just leaned on that poor little girl for strength. Unfair, but we did. And we'd have her following her sister and reporting on her, and it wasn't right. And when she wasn't doing that, Sue and I would just heap our frustrations and our fears on her until we drove a little girl deeper into herself. We had 13-year-old Judy, just a teenager. Judy, every time we had a fight in our home, and gosh, I'm going to tell you, we had them by the hour sometimes, screaming, yelling, bitter fights. Judy would rush to the scene of every one of those and stand next to her older sister, Terry, and defend Terry against Sue and I. My family was split. Mike was 8 years old then, and he was a boy. I mean, he's been a boy, and now he's a man in every sense of the word. And yet that little boy was having trouble in school, emotional problems, and I couldn't believe it. He was so torn up inside for the terrible things going on in his house. As I told you, my decision was to fight. The truancy continued. I dropped Terry off at school. They'd call 20 minutes later to say she never got there. I'd watch her walk in the front door. She'd walk right out the back, and then Sue'd call me at work, and we'd drive the streets of Arlington and the university hoping to find them before they got holed up somewhere. They'd long since given up pot. You know, if you're a pot sympathizer, I want to tell you, you got an enemy in me that you'll never get rid of. I hate this stuff, and I think anybody who thinks it's easy and fun and it's okay is a fool, and I don't mind telling you that. I don't know any serious drug user who didn't start with pot. Now, not all of them go on. But I don't know anybody who started with it that didn't go on. They had got into LSD and PCP regularly. The reason we found out Judy was defending her sister Terry, the second blow came when I found out Judy was involved in drugs too. My family was disintegrating. I was beginning to doubt my ability to handle my own problems. Pride told me I didn't have to live like this. I was Dick Gauch. It wasn't my fault anyway. And maybe I should just leave the mess and start a new life for myself. Thank God I didn't. Somehow God reminded me of the men I knew who had done that, and the horrible emptiness, the lie of their life, and worse than that, the tragedy of their families. And I determined that wouldn't happen to me. I decided to do something about it. In fact, one day I called and we went to Franklin County Children's Services for family counseling. Now, I want to tell you something. I counsel today, and I just want to tell you something. I don't see men coming for counseling very often. Thank God you women do. Men don't have the guts, too prideful to come and ask for help. You have to know how desperate I was to go. I'd like to tell you it helped, but it didn't. In fact, I really have an aversion to secular counseling today because of that. Christian counseling, I'm all for. Secular counseling, not if you're a Christian. And I don't think anybody ought to. There's a world of difference between the principles and the goals involved. The only thing I can remember from those many sessions was 6 of us in the car coming home, the 3 girls in the back seat, nobody saying a word. And Sue and I in the front seat with little Mike crammed between us, and the only sounds in the car every time were the sobs of my wife from the horrible things that had gone on in that session. The 3rd blow came. I needed one more. Wasn't quite ready yet. Our daughter Terry and Carol said they were going to spend a night at the 3rd girlfriend's house, and we checked and double-checked and felt fairly sure they met it, but somehow that night we decided to check again, and they weren't there. We began driving the streets, Carol's father and I, and make a long story short, we extracted them from a house where they were intending to hold up all weekend. It was a bitter night, a terrible fight. I'll never forget it as long as I live, and I've really tried to block it out of my mind. I can't tell you the filth and the vulgarity and the hate and the bitterness that spewed from my daughter's lips under the influence of drugs. It's as if I was another human being. She began to beat on me, and in anger I picked her up and I threw her across the room. We went to bed. None of us slept. Terry wanted to leave, and somehow there were times when I wished she wouldn't come home, and yet somehow I knew if she didn't, if she ever left, I'd never see her again alive, and I couldn't let her go. She was so high that night. Later we heard some sounds, and I went to the front bedroom, Judy's bedroom, and she was leaning out talking to Carol and Terry's boyfriend. And she'd already wakened Terry, and Terry was dressing to go with them. I ran downstairs and invited the boys in, and Carol's boyfriend came in, but Terry's ran off into darkness. And I want to tell you something. I'm not being dramatic tonight. Some of the men may sense what I'm saying. He may have saved his own life. Yeah, I hate it that much now. He wouldn't come in. Terry came down. We talked a long time, and about 5 or 5:30 that morning, Terry left to get her head on straight, she said. She walked out into the darkness with Carol's boyfriend and met hers, and they disappeared. Hours later, the state patrol called. They asked if I had a daughter, Terry Lynn. I said I did. They asked me if I knew where she was right now, and I said I didn't. I explained that she had gone off in the company of 2 young men earlier that morning. I had no idea where she was. I was embarrassed to say it. I said, Mr. Gauch, he said there was a high-speed chase, one of our units chasing a stolen automobile heading east towards West Virginia. The occupants wouldn't stop, and shots were fired, and the vehicle stopped, and the occupants fled. We fired more shots. I said, Mr. Gauch, we have 2 young men in custody right now. And your daughter, Terry, is an at-large suspect in grand theft auto. I made a decision to save what was left of us. No matter what it took, I was going to save it. One of the things I decided to do, we belonged to a church in our community, and I decided we'd have to go back to church. I went home and told my family, we're going to church Sunday, and everybody said, no, no, no. Especially the kids didn't want to go. I said, we're going to church Sunday. They said, no, we're not. And we went to church Sunday. Well, whatever it was, I was looking for in church. I know now, but I didn't know then. Church. It wasn't there. It wasn't in my church Sunday morning. It wasn't there. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I just knew that it wasn't there. I coached Little League sports, and I'd been working with an 11-year-old boy who'd had some disappointments on the team, and he'd really responded to my coaching and help, and his son made the All-Star, and we won the city championship, and so his dad wanted to say thank you. And he said, I want to buy your lunch. And I said, well, that's okay. He said, no, come on, let me buy your lunch. And finally I agreed, and I'm going to lunch this day to meet him, and I'm thinking, I don't even know the guy, what are we going to talk about? And we're there, and we're talking about the same old nothing, that men do, and all of a sudden, in the middle of this thing, he says, my wife and I have been visiting other churches. And he said, we're going Sunday. You want to go with us? Now, remember, I don't go other churches till I check them out, so I'm about ready to tell old John I can't do that, and, good excuse, and I'm thinking, he's still talking, and I hear this voice, which sounded just like me, said, sure, John, what time Sunday? Well, I'm too proud to tell him I didn't say that, and I don't know what to do. I'm really in a spot. So I go right home after lunch, right? And guys, forgive me, okay? But I promised to tell the truth this morning. And I go home after lunch, and I'm telling Sue a bunch about just nothing. She probably wondered I was there. And I start out the door, and I go, oh, by the way. Girls, it's always the big one. I said, oh, by the way, we're going to visit another church Sunday. And I tried to get the door shut behind me, and she said, wait a minute. What church? Well, I don't really know. What else did he say? I said, oh, yeah, we're supposed to bring our Bible. She said, it's one of those. I said, well, now, hon, where's our Bible? She said, let's see. When we moved, we put it in the bookcase by the fireplace. It was still there. Nobody bothered it. And we decided not to take the kids. I felt fortunate I wasn't going alone, to tell you the truth. That morning, I heard 2 things. First of all, something that blew my theology. I did have one, For there is one God and one mediator between men and God, the man Jesus Christ. Up till then, I thought, hey, man, there are lots of ways, wasn't there? Everybody's going. What are you going to do with that? And then he said, Jesus answered and said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. I'm stuck. I either got to accept it or I got to reject it. And it's really got me thinking. I left there. That was in August. In October, John comes up to the football field and he said, hey, there's a rally at OSU Country Club on Saturday night. He said, why don't you go with us? No way I'm going anywhere with John. I wouldn't even go to McDonald's with him now, right? And I heard that same stupid voice say, sure, John, what time? I had not even asked John what it was. Okay? Well, what the purpose of it? It was Word of Life Ministries. Jack Wurtson was here from Schooner Lake, New York, okay? And Jack had picked 5 men out to share their personal testimonies. I'd never heard that before. I never heard men stand up and, confess all this stuff. I thought, And now, he picked 5. God picked 2 of the 5, okay? First man to stand, all right? You ready? Now, I played college football, coached college football, all right? Guess who he picked? A former OSU fullback, played pro ball. Hey, my definition of manhood. There he was. And he talks about his personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Much to my shame, I'd use the name often, but never with love like that. Never with the tenderness. Tom Barrington by name. And, what am I going to do? I believed him. I knew I could trust him. Well, Jack had us bow our heads and close our eyes. We were seated, and he said, tonight, if your life's a mess and out of control, then maybe you need the Savior. And he quoted Matthew 11:28, and that verse to this day is important to me. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus' words. I want to tell you something. To me, it looked like a life preserver in the middle of a raging sea. And old Dick Gauch, macho man, reached out and grabbed a hold of it because I was about to drown, and I knew it. You see, God had broken the will of a very prideful man. And in the next 2.5 months, I want to tell you what happened. I saw my wife, my young son Mike, my daughter Debbie, the middle girl who never took drugs, my youngest daughter Judy. And one Sunday night we had it confirmed while in the pew that both my mother and my daughter Terry had accepted Jesus Christ into their life in 2.5 months. We don't know if we have the right, but we think we're a miracle family. We think for God to do that for us was just an unbelievable blessing. Didn't mean it was all over, folks. You see, the title of our testimony is God Made Us a Family, and I think you know now why we title it that. But there was a lot to be accomplished yet. Terry was still very much in pressure. She was still involved with Kim, and Kim trying to pressure her back into drugs until we begged God to do something. We asked God to split them up. Lord, please do something. About 3 weeks later, Kim's father received a call from his employer, was notified that he was immediately to report to Cleveland and begin working there. Within 3 months, his family was moved. And Terry was free for Kim 5 days a week. They were so much in love, they thought that they saw each other every weekend. But 5 days a week, Terry was free, and there began to be within her some awakening. And finally, I convinced Terry she ought to go to the pastor and tell him everything. I sat in the parking lot in the car, and I prayed the whole hour and a half she was there. I never stopped praying. We were about halfway home. And Terry sobbed a few times, and I just kind of quickly glanced, and she was not looking up at all. And then through her sob, she said, Dad, I've decided to stay with Jesus. I've never heard such beautiful words before. You see, that night she came to me and said, Dad, the pastor gave me a tract and said if we would pray for Kim this way, God in his mercy and grace might save him too. She said, Dad, I don't understand it. Would you read it to me and explain it to me, please? And I took it from her. I read it, and I didn't understand a word of it. I read it a second time, and then it dawned on me. You see, Kim didn't deserve salvation. Aren't you glad I'm not God? I hated him. I hated him, and he didn't deserve it. But Terry was standing there so pitifully waiting for me, and I began to pray, and I said, Lord, please help me. And I read it the third time, and I understood it. And I explained it to Terry, and there was power in it. I could just sense it. And she said, when I finished, she said, oh, Dad, would you pray with me for Kim? I couldn't say a word. She stood there the longest time, and finally I said, okay, honey, I'll pray too. It wasn't my prayers, it wasn't my faith, I'll tell you that, because I didn't quite care. But sometime in the next 3 months, Terry came running down the stairs one Wednesday evening that they always called each other, and I'll never forget the look on her face. And I'll never forget that night. Kim had found Jesus Christ. I wish I had time to tell you all the stories. Okay? Miracle after miracle. We started sharing our testimony all over the Midwest. We've been just about everywhere you can think of. And in my study of God's Word, I really knew one of the things I had to know more about and understand, deeply understand, was faith. And you've ever heard the expression, don't pray for patience? Well, I got another one for you. You see, on that afternoon on my knees, I said, God, make me a man of faith. Now, all of us want the diploma. We'd all like to graduate. But let me tell you about the training course. You see, right after that, 3 things happened. The first thing that happened is that my Christian employer, for some reason, decided he was in financial difficulty and without notice stopped paying. The second thing that happened is that somehow things went haywire in my church and I had no fellowship with the men and the pastors. And then I got sick. I had a deteriorating disc and mono at 40-some years of age. Not funny at 40. And I got down on my knees, and I want to tell you, I begged God, and I pleaded with God, and I confessed every sin since the War of 1812, and why are you punishing me, God? And he doesn't speak to me, but boy, the thought was just firm in my mind. Weren't you the guy that asked me to make him a man of faith? He said, how do you think I have to go about that, Dick? Well, he has to take away everything that you think is important and necessary. And that's where I was. And for 7 years, we suffered. And I begged him and I pleaded with him. And finally, one day, I realized that I wasn't being punished for anything. I was in a training program. I used to hate the book of Job. I wouldn't go near it because I knew enough about it to know I didn't want to know. And one day I thought, I think I'd better study that book. And I found in Job some precious answers to my own situation. And I knew God was training me, helping me. I still didn't know what for. My desire to serve the Lord and work in these things grew and grew and grew until I knew something that I guess I've always known. And that was that I couldn't stay in secular work anymore. So I set about to find God's will. Obviously, it was going to be on some church staff or some Christian school, and everybody I went to said, oh, praise the Lord, Dick, you're it. And not one of those doors ever opened. And finally, some businessmen came to me and said, Dick, you're looking all over the community, all over for ministry. Has it ever occurred to you that you have a ministry? I said, Dick, if nobody wants you, maybe God's calling you to do it on your own. Now, I don't think that's it at all. You see, my ministry of faith was going to be, I was going to get on church staff or school somewhere and get paid a salary. Wasn't that faith? Well, that wasn't the way I was led. And 3 years ago this July, we incorporated a ministry. And we've been all over the Midwest. And the big dream is that someday we're going to have a farm for families and kids. A place where we can get together and sort out problems and draw close to the Lord and really heal marriages and families. I see, I'm not so convinced anymore there are a lot of kid problems. See, I can't find that very often in my counseling. I am convinced, though, there's a lot of family problems and marital problems, and the kids are only victims of that. But that's what God's done. You see, a man who one time lived for possessions and privileges and position and pride, that's not natural, not normal for a man. Those things don't mean anything anymore. You see, somehow in the process, God gave us a servant's heart. And that's all. If God will just use me, okay, the day he doesn't is the day I don't want to live anymore. I challenge you today. If you've not let God have that kind of control in your life and you've not let him give you a servant's heart, I'm telling you, with all my heart, I'm pleading with you. Man, join up, will you? Get all of it you can.
What an incredible story of God's redemption and never-ending love on this edition of Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk. If you were encouraged or moved emotionally by these broadcasts, call our listener feedback line at 844-823-2669. Once you call, you'll have 2 minutes to share your thoughts on this program, tell us your testimony, or even offer a suggestion of someone you think we should have on the show. That number again is 844-823-2669. You can also get in touch with us when you email contact@myfamilytalk.com. That's the word contact@myfamilytalk.com. If after listening to Family Talk over the last few days, you recognize that your family is being torn apart, or your relationship with your husband or wife is not where it needs to be, we'd love to help you. We have a vast library of valuable materials on our resources page at drjamesdobson.org that can directly assist you as a parent, grandparent, or spouse. Don't wait. Go now to drjamesdobson.org, click on the Resources tab, and scroll through our diverse collection of CDs, DVDs, books, and much more that we've created to support you and your family. This is Jim Veldhuis. Thanks for listening today. Be sure to join us tomorrow as you'll hear a conversation Dr. Dobson had with Mary Hunt, the editor and creator of Cheapskate Monthly, on the topic of settling financial disputes in marriage. That's next time on Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk. Family Talk is not associated with Focus on the Family.